these were we would carefully plan them so that we would slowly reveal what really happened between him and Ruby in a way that sort of was also showing him slowly getting drunk. By the way, that's my shoulder on the right side of screen. My Hitchcockian cameo. We would be slowly revealing his meltdown, which is ultimately going to lead to him wanting to kill himself. Um, Again, these scenes between Amber and John we rehearsed them, but on the day that we shot, it was like Amber was a different person. She was like a young girl, and very vulnerable, and those tears are real and everything. And it made the believability of the whole thing work. We were on a subway again, stealing the shot. But as I said, we scripted it so that when John mouths the words on the subway, it is the words that, he says to her. And it takes us into the flashback one more time. I really wanted to make these flashbacks organic, because sometimes you see flashbacks in movies. I've done it myself, where you put a flashback to try and explain something and it wasn't originally scripted, and it feels like you're shoving it in. And this was not going to be shoved in. This was definitely organic to the movie. And of course here, for the actual kiss, we have a shock zoom right into John's eyes when he realizes his prurient thoughts have taken a hold of him. So we're back to the pre-Giuliani Times Square. This was, this is the real deal. Scary stuff. John is just sort of about to enter a bar that we ended up shooting on, I think it was 41st and 9th. This is not the exterior of the bar we shot in. This bar was really seedy. And the way they would let us film there for free was that we had to keep it open. So basically, these extras who were all great, but there's also real drunks in there as well. This bar was so scary that Sarah went downstairs to bring some lighting cable down and said that the basement of this bar was the scariest single place she'd ever been in her life. We liked it, though. They were friendly to us. Now, the man playing the bartender is none other than my father. He was not an actor, though he's subsequently been in a number of things. But I really thought he'd be great for this role. And of course, it's every son's fantasy to have his father say the line, "teenage cunt." So I was able to get him to say the line, and I actually had him audition, and I thought he was great. I mean, he's a real New York character. He's slightly nutty in a great way. That's really his hair. I mean, he's just kind of oddball, and I thought he'd be perfect to play this sort of very sleazy bartender. He has to list this laundry list of drugs, half of which he'd never even heard of in his life, which was kind of funny. But, he's great. By the way, this audio flashback here was not scripted. This was something that we put in post because we needed to explain the tattoo again on the neck, which of course comes to play at the end of the movie, but we were afraid people would not have noticed at the very beginning of the movie that Ruby had a tattoo on her neck. So we added that line, and we also added a loop line earlier in the movie where when she's fooling around with Maddie, Sam Rockwell, and he says, "I love that tattoo on your neck," which was also added in post to try and explain that so the audience would get it. And it works. We kind of found that out testing the movie. I'm a big believer in testing of films, not necessarily on a big studio level where they test the movie and then cut it to be the most bland version, non-offensive version of a movie they can get. On an indie film, you're basically testing it in small rooms with audiences of 10 or 15 people, and you can really ask specific questions of problems that you're having to see if things are working. And on Mercy, we really tested the hell out of it. And I've done it on everything I've done since. I feel it's a critical part of my editing process. What do you want? So my dad ended up playing a bartender in my movie Oxygen, and it's kind of a great thing that I gave him this second little career. What do you want? He's so good. So we're about to head into the sort of most interesting scene in the movie to me, my favorite scene, the most controversial scene in the film, the love it or hate it scene, which is basically when Frank ends up in the lair of this naked black gun dealer, basically into the inner recesses of his mind. Who knows if this even is a real place or not. It's certainly a surreal experience. We shot it in a theater in Times Square, the Lyric Theater, which has been refurbished, but at the time was completely empty. It had been a real theater and then a porn theater, and then it was empty for a while. I love my dad's evil smile here when he drops Frank off at the naked black man's lair. We shot in the Lyric Theater. It was perfect. Scorsese had filmed Taxi Driver. It's where De Niro takes Sybil Shepherd on their date. So I love being able to be filming in the same building because Taxi Driver was such an influence on me. This sequence was surreal to begin with on paper, but it became even more surreal when we were filming it because it was absolutely freezing and we had our generators broke and we had no heat. And basically this actor, who is a performance artist named Flotilla DeBarge, whose real name is Kevin Joseph, was basically naked in this freezing place. And he had a lot of lines, and the cold gave it a very, he just was on edge, and it made us on edge, and it made the scene on edge. You probably recognize him a little bit, maybe by his voice, because he also played the transvestite prostitute earlier in the movie, which was the part we originally cast him for. And then we suggested he do this part as well, and we thought it would be an interesting idea, and he's such an interesting look and a great actor in his own way. So he ended up playing this sort of nightmare version of Frank's worst fears. And then as we were editing it, so we had a surreal shoot, we had a surreal script, but then we really started getting a little trippy in the editing room. There, by the way, is a scream from that earlier scene that is now in this scene to show John slowly going nuts. And we started repeating lines. We went backwards and forwards. He jumps twice. And it was just a way to sort of start to get a little freaky. As you can see here, he jumps and then he jumps again. And it was really an editorial exercise, and we spent a long time, and we edited the movie in about 8 weeks, and we spent a good week on just this scene. And Adam had this great idea to use this footage when he's sort of remembering what has happened in our story. And you see, it's coming up in about a minute, you see scenes from the movie with people sort of standing still in sort of like a ghost-like weird fashion. They're almost in still life, except it's live, it's film. And what Adam ended up doing was he ended up using footage that we had shot between the slate being slated and my saying action, when the actors were just waiting for me to say action. There's this usually is about 5-second pause while you wait for the crew to be quiet, or you wait for everything to be set or the focus to be set. And Adam found about 4 or 5 of those, and he put them in as a way to sort of bring a sort of surreal quality to the scene, and it's so effective. And that's when I say that we use almost every frame of this movie that we shot. I don't think, here they are. I don't think that anyone has ever used footage like this, which is just before me saying action, in a movie before. But it's very haunting because it's especially with that whistle music that Rolf put on, which is so effective. His score cannot be underestimated. And John was great too. It was so cold in that thing, but he kept his cool, as they say. And he was able to feel, those are real tears that are going down his face when he's reading the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think it's very effective. And this was a scene that we had a long discussion of. To be honest, some people just didn't quite understand why it's in this movie. And I think some people still to this day don't understand why it's in this movie. But to many of the crew and the cast, it was their favorite scene, and it is definitely my favorite scene because it's the most, it's the most emotional scene in a movie that has so many sort of thriller aspects that you don't really get a lot of emotion. But this says so much. If you ever to see the movie on a big screen, which is probably unlikely until I'm 90 and they have a retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art, hopefully. You can see him crying, and it's tears slowly going down his face. There it is. It's pretty incredible. You can't quite see it that clearly on DVD. I wish that at the end of the scene the cops had not burst in. I wish that he had just sort of passed out and woke up at a bar or something, and it was really in his imagination. Because it's kind of absurd that the cops are waiting outdoors of this room until the last possible minute when a gun's to his head. I have no one to blame but myself, and so I blame myself. This scene's great. This scene between Sam and Amber, I think this is Sam's favorite scene in the movie. He's so good because he's going through so much emotion here. He's got anger, he's got sadness, he can't believe how cold she is, and he realizes he's been used. And this was a very difficult scene to shoot because, first of all, again, it's one take, which of course actors do like in a way, in that they get a full, it's like a theatrical experience for them. They don't have to deal with stopping and starting and stopping and starting, but it was difficult because we needed him to hit his lighting cue because it was a very specific place we needed him to stand. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to see his eyes. And we were rushed, so we probably should have lit it in a different way where he could have moved around more freely. But we did what we did because we basically lit it with one light. But Sam was very frustrated that he had to hit this mark. And so take after take, he wasn't hitting the mark, and I was cutting. And he was getting angrier and angrier. And we almost, we almost had it in with each other. But the fact is, he was using his anger at me actually to help him in the scene. So each take that he was getting angry, he was actually getting better and more complicated and vulnerable. And so he almost used this cue issue as a motivation for him as an actor. Actors do that. I think I'll never again, in such an emotional scene, make an actor have to hit a mark as much as I did in this scene. And I'm sorry Sam had to be my experiment in that, but at the same time, it really sort of helped him. And I've seen it done before. On Oxygen, Adrian Brody suddenly was upset because the camera assistant was in his eye line by the camera where she had been, for 28 straight days. But on this day, he was upset about it, and he got mad at her. But he wasn't really mad at her. He was just trying